Stefan Everts, thanks very much for joining us for our podcast on your career. 101 GP wins, 10 World Championships, 5 Motocross of Nation wins, and 1 ISDE win. That's a pretty impressive collection. Whenever you look back at your career, are you 100% content with everything you've done?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I've achieved a lot. I mean, if you squeeze the lemon, I could have maybe won here and there something more. But at the end, I'm happy. You know, if you see now the contenders now, like Antonio Cairoli, and they're chasing the records, but it takes them a long time. So it just realizes myself that what of a mission that I've done in the past and winning so much. So sometimes I have to squeeze my skin and say, yeah, what I've achieved. But I mean, to me, it looked at that stage all so normal, and I just went from one to the other. And I mean, I've run, yeah, it's like I said, sometimes it seems too normal for me, but anyway, it's not. The people speak about it, and so no.
At what age did you start riding the bike at? And was it always easy for you to ride a bike, or did you have to work a lot at it as well?
No, I had a natural talent. I had a good feeling with the motorcycle, and but then once you get into racing and it starts to become more serious, you go into a high level. You're gonna start to compete with other contenders which have experience, who are much more fitter than you are. It's been stages where I had difficult times, but I had a lot of ambition in myself always. So it didn't matter how hard it was and what kind of mountain I had to climb on just to go to the next level and next stage. And I always been doing that since the last day that I've raced.
Your technique on the bike, even whenever you came into the early 90s when you were racing, it was more like the American style with the elbows up. That technique, did you work on that a lot when you were growing up, or was it just something you felt you had within you?
No, I've when I was a kid, I went, of course, a lot to the GPs, and I saw all the racers in the GPs, especially the ones who raced with my father. But at that point, America was coming bigger, and the supercrosses. So I started to watch where I could, because we didn't have internet, we didn't have those videos and social media. So it was very hard to sometimes see some videos from America. But what I could see, I always was there to see it, and then. Yeah, that gave me a bit of an influence. Johnny Mara has always been one of my favorite riders, and he had a fantastic riding style, and I was so impressed with that. And yeah, I mean, it came from somewhere. So I had a lot of input since a small child, and I've been a mix of many riders out there. And at one stage, I started to develop my foot peg technique, which also came a bit from trials riding. I've been a lot riding on a trials bike, hill climbing, and just having fun and taking jumps and with some friends. And I mean that also developed my foot peg riding style. So I'm a mix of many things, but I had a good DNA. I got the DNA from my father, the racing DNA, the ambition, discipline, and all that. It was there. So yeah, at the end, it all came good.
Your consistency over your, I think it's a 17 GP year career, you were 13 times in the top 2, 14 in the top 3. The other 3 years, I think you'd bad injuries, ruled you out of the championship altogether. That's a pretty remarkable, sustained challenge of winning world titles every year, whether you came first or second. Was that an extra pressure in a way? Obviously, everyone wants to do that, but it meant every year you had a lot of stress because you were so good, a world championship was always on the line.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I've put a lot of pressure on myself, because I was stepping into my father's footsteps, and I wanted to become as good as he was at least, and that meant 4 championships. So that I put myself a lot of pressure on my shoulders, and it wasn't easy in those first years. I went a bit up and down, and I mean I've lost a few championships where, yeah, I mean maybe the pressure was there. I made some mistakes. I got some injuries. But overall, I did manage to do a very consistent career with not only titles but also second and third places. Yeah, I mean, from day one that I start racing GPs, it was like, okay, I'm here to win, and not just to go out and be top 10 rider. So it all started from day one. I mean, I couldn't win the championship in '89 against Parker and Bob Moore, but 3 years later, I was winning, and from there on, yeah, everything started to take off. Yeah, I mean, you learn to live with it. At one point, it's like Cairoli now or Tim Gajser now. They are not bothered anymore with that. They have achieved what they want, and everything what comes now is extra. So the pressure's falling off their shoulders even more, and they start to race even better.
You talked about the mental pressure you had there living up to your dad. Now, a lot of people, I think I remember even Greg Albertine talking about it. He came from nowhere, but he saw you came direct into a factory team with a 4-time world champion as a dad guiding you. And the perception there was that you got everything straight away, and a rider like Albertine had to work his way up. But the way you described it there was that maybe a lot of people aren't saying when they're looking from the outside is the pressure you had within and essentially a weight on your shoulders to try and live up to being a 4-time world champion. Most people are just happy to win a Grand Prix, or if they're lucky enough to win one world championship. So could you give us an insight into, while it looks like you got everything perfect straight in from a young age, you had a lot to deal with as well that maybe people don't really recognize?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure was extreme high. And also, my dad tried to teach me and coach me in the right way, and that wasn't either between the two of us. We had a lot of arguments. It wasn't easy. It wasn't really easy. And now I see a little bit the same with Liam. He also needs to deal with that pressure, and he also puts in a lot of hard work. But because everything is so well organized around him, you have no other things on his mind than just to perform at his best, and that brings even more pressure to himself. And that first podium in Oz for him was so important, just to prove himself that what he's doing is good, and he just need to let it go a little bit more and just enjoy and have fun more. And it's not so easy. It's easy said, but it's so difficult done. And I can understand him no better than anyone else than myself, because I went through the same thing. And for him, it's even harder. I mean, his father is 10-time world champion. My father was only 4-time world champion. So not easy situation. So we are also working with a mental coach, sports coach, somebody who's a little bit outside the sport and sees it from a different point of view. And we are doing that for quite a while now, and yeah, he feels good with it. He feels really good with it. And only what I want to see is that he performs at his best. But stepping in your father's footsteps is not easy. I mean, Greg Albertine didn't have an easy career to come from nowhere, and there's many other riders like that. But from our side, what we are doing is also very, very tough.
Did you have a mental coach whenever you were young as well, or was that not really something that was talked about then?
No, back then it wasn't really in. I had a good trainer. I had a really good relationship with my trainer, so I could talk with him about many, many things. And a lot of it, you have to deal with it yourself, and also find. We can only help and support him, but at the end, he needs to find the best way for himself to really let it go and just step on that motorcycle and give his best. Only he can do it.
Yeah. Whenever you won your first World Championship, the 125cc World Championship in 1991, was there a weight off your shoulders then that you had achieved the premier status of being a world champion, or did you always feel that was the beginning for you?
No, that was only the beginning. It was in some way a relief, and I won my first title in Suzuka in Japan in '91, and when I crossed the finish line, I was like, okay, is that it? I wasn't happy. I didn't feel the right emotion yet. I was too young. Everything went too fast for me, and that's also not good. So then the next year, I start to deal with injuries and pressure and everything else, and that was a very, very hard time. To come to my first title went so easy and fast, but then to come back to my second championship in '95, this was a really tough period there, and still I was with that pressure. I still had that in mind. I just don't want to become a one-time world champion, and that's it. I just want to prove I'm a real champion, and to be at least as good as my dad, and that means win 4 championships. That was the minimum I had in my mind that I should achieve.
Sidestepping across at the end of 1991, I was actually watching a few wintertime Supercross videos of that season a few weeks ago, and you were a good Supercross rider. A lot of people maybe in America don't realize how good you were at Supercross at that age. You went to America the beginning of '92, I believe, rode a few races. I think you got a top 10 at Houston. You were running well at Daytona as well. And from what I remember, you didn't have much preparation going into that season. So how were your feelings on the Supercross track at that time? Because you were racing a lot of heavy hitters with Jeff Stanton, Damon Bradshaw, Jean-Michel Beale, and you were pretty competitive. And if an 18-year-old rider did that now at the Premier Class and Supercross, there'd be a lot of hype about how well he was doing with limited preparation. So your actual results and your skill level on Supercross, I think, is maybe a wee bit underrated.
Yeah, that's true. I had good skills on Supercross, and I had a lot of interest in. And actually, my early days, I had in mind to go to US and ride Supercross. That was my ultimate dream at that point, or at that stage. And when I started racing GPs, then I mean the Supercross scene in Europe was at its best. So there was so many Supercrosses all winter. So I went from motocross into the Supercross winter season, and then back to motocross, and I did that for a couple of years until slowly I started to become tired. I had no recovery anymore, and I started to go into injuries. But the '92 season, pre-season, we went to US. We did 6 Supercrosses. I came straight from the Army base because I had 1 month of Army training schools. So I had no training. I went to Houston. I went on the final in the main. I went 12 laps. I went on P3, and then I dropped back to P9. So I had good Supercross riding skills, and the next rounds was also good. San Diego was good. I mean, Daytona was good, but I just kept on crashing. I was having good speed. I was one of the fastest in the whoops, but I just always crashed my brains out, and that was a pity. I never could come into that top 5, even that I had the speed and the Supercross skills. So I came back from US and I went into the international races and the first GPs, and I just smoked everyone. I was well prepared. I had a lot of aggression, and I was ready for the '92 season until I lost my spleen in Northeim. So it was a bummer. Anyhow, after that, I continued try to win the 250 title, and that only happened in '95. But by '95, I was a little bit out of the Supercross winter scene. Also, Supercrosses start to go down. Was not so many anymore. I mean, the classic one like Bercy and Geneva and all that, they survived it. But I just needed to have a break in the winter. So I came to the point to make that decision to go US or stay in Europe. And then also Dave Grant had a lot of influence on my decisions back then. And And eventually I decided to stay in Europe and try and chase the titles from Joël Robert. So that was my next ambition. I was always, when one thing is done, I was already busy with the next thing in my mind. That's the next goal. So I'm always looking ahead. I never stood still. What happened today? No, I was already busy with what's coming tomorrow.
Do you regret not moving to the US, or were you happy now with all the accolades you have in the World Championship that turned out to be the right decision for you?
No, I'm happy. You know, I'm satisfied. I mean, I had a little taste of that Supercross scene in '92, and they are great memories for me. Racing Anaheim and San Diego, Daytona, the big classic races over there, and I'm happy to say I stood on the start line there on the main event, and I raced them. So it was a super experience. But I don't regret deciding to stay in Europe and chase the records of Joël Robert. And so I'm happy that I'm the one who put the new records there, and we'll see who will be the first one to break them.
The 92 season, as you mentioned, you got injured. Well, I think you were actually leading the championship whenever that injury happened. So 93, 94, you became a pretty big rivalry with Greg Albertine. 93, he seemed to have the edge on you most of the season, especially in the starts. And then you swapped teams essentially, although you were riding Kawasaki in 94. And you won more Grand Prix than he did. You probably had more raw speed than he did, but a broken collarbone that saw you miss one round ultimately seemed to cost you that championship. How bitter did that rivalry get? Because I was watching the Whiskey Throttle show with Greg, and whenever he was asked about those years, he almost went back to that time in his mind, and you could see the rivalry seeping out, and his kind of rivalry with you. Although he still had a lot of respect for you, you could see he was still that competitive edge was back in his mind again. How how do you see that rivalry now looking back? And was that one of the most intense of your career?
It was one of the most intensive. I mean, also with Sebastian Totelli was '98. It was also very, very intensive. But with Greg, you know, Greg was a young kid when he came to Europe, and he also started to race those supercrosses, and he had a lot of ups and downs, did a lot of crashing. But then, yeah, I mean, we had a hard year in '93. He stepped into the class. He was already on the growth. We had three models back then, and I lost everything on the start. You know, I couldn't start with that Suzuki. So here we went through so many tests and so many start practices, and we couldn't get it figured out. And at the end of the day, when I swapped to Kawasaki in '94, I managed to take the good start. So it was a matter of the bike. And Sylvain Geboers, he was always so protective with the Suzuki setup, and we couldn't change anything, and it was the best. All of it, what comes from Japan is the best, and we cannot go against them what they bring. And that kind of blew up my whole confidence and everything, because the problem was with me, but it wasn't eventually not me. It was also the motorcycle, and that we saw in '94. I was so fed up with all that situation that I wanted to leave from Geboers. So I moved to Kawasaki in '94, and then he moves to Suzuki. So we kind of swapped, because I bring also Jan de Groot to Kawasaki. Then that was one of my big requests from Alec Wright back then, who was running the Kawasaki team. I said, okay, let's do this team. I want Harry Nolt as my mechanic, and I want Jan de Groot as my tuner. And that he did. He did everything for me, what I asked. And we took off really well in the season. I just DNF'd twice in Spain, because first moto I broke my rear wheel, and the second moto I crashed and I lost my Kickstarter. I couldn't start my bike anymore. So I had already 2 DNFs when we started the season. Then later on I broke my collarbone. I missed another GP. And then I had another DNF in France, a start crash, and broke my whole bike. And I had 6 DNFs in that year, and I still lost the championship by 9 points from Greg. So yeah, I won the most GPs. And then the rivalry was so high and intense, because yeah, I was every weekend I was like, okay, I'm gonna win. I felt so strong in my mind that something would have happened. And Greg, he was just chilling and having fun, and and everything went good. And so we had some good fights, and it's good to look back at it. And I have a lot of respect for Greg, what he did. He was just a complete different personality than I was, and also a rider. So yeah, but that's fine, everyone has that. Huh?
Moving on, then you finally get your 250 world title in '95, and then '96, '97. Marnik Mavorts was your biggest competitor. Were those years easier for you than the Albertine Tortelli years? I know you had issues with fuel and points deductions in '96, and you came back to win that title, was quite close. But '97, you dominated really on the new aluminium framed Honda, which no one else seemed to ride. Talk us through those 3 years if you can.
Yeah, in '96, after winning the first championship for Kawasaki, first ever world championship in motocross off-road, I was dealing with Jan and Kawasaki, and there was no possibility to go anywhere higher with salary or bonuses and all that. And I was like, okay, that's it, and then we move on. And we eventually ended up with Colin Reed. He's supposed to get the factory HRC bikes, and he did. But Colin was a fantastic man, fantastic family, but he didn't understand racing. He didn't know what racing was. And then we had the mechanic that I got from him. He thought that he was the smartest from all the world. So it was a really hard year, and then we had that fuel business. Thanks to Dave Grant, that we got our points back at the end. He could have proved some things that made the FEM take back or give back my points. So it wasn't an easy year at all. And then we decided to move on from RWJ and do our own team and do what we want to do and how we think is best. And that we did in '97. But then '97, Honda came with this new aluminium chassis. Jeremy McGrath just pulled out of his contract 1 week before Supercross. So, but I couldn't do that. So I had to go and race that new aluminium frame, and it wasn't easy. It took me like 4 GPs to figure out the bike, how it was working, and adapt a bit my riding style to it. But at the end, I won 9 GPs, I think, from in that season. So I still managed to do good, and yeah, I mean, I won the championship easy at one point. But yeah, that was '97 and '98. Yeah, we went into the big Tortelli fight. The HRC bike got better. Was running easier. They made big progress and big steps forward. But at the end, yeah, Tortelli could manage to win the title. I remember 2 things from that year, and the GP of Belgium. From there on, they find something special on the motorcycle, and just Tortelli start to take the whole shots, and yeah, it was like, I need more power, and then it took HRC like 3 months to get me a faster bike.
Okay.
And just when I did Namur, Poland, Tuchenthal, I win like eight motos in straight with Namur included then. Eh? So I finally got my power, what I needed for the starts, but at the end I was done. I was done. It was such a mental tough season, and I was always expecting that Sebastian would make here or there one big mistake, and that would cost him the championship, but he didn't. We always stayed. I would gain 3 points and he would gain 3 points. I would lose. So we were always so close whole season, and yeah, eventually he won it. So it was a tough one for me.
Was that one of your toughest championship losses because you were so close in speed? Like sometimes Sebastian would be a wee bit faster than you. Other times you would beat him. You know, your moto wins were very close. So was it pretty heartbreaking to lose that? And was it difficult to recover through that winter to find motivation for the next season?
Yeah, it was very heartbreaking, but I learned from '94 because that year when I lost from Greg, at the end, in the last GP in Geldorf, I got so emotional, and it took me over. And all winter I was down, and I didn't train for 3-4 months, and I just was fed up with racing back in '94. And then when I lost it again in '98, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do that for a second time. I'm just gonna go home, sit 7 days, cry like a baby for 7 days, and just turn the switch, and we move on. And that's what I did in '98. And 1 week later, I didn't race fast cross because of that. And then we moved on to Foxhill. And then I smoked everyone in the mud in Foxhill. That was just 2 weeks after I lost the championship in Greece. So it was a big difference from '94, where I was still, when it was New Year, I was still partying, and I was just down. And in '98, I did it differently. So it was of course way better, and just make the click and move on. It's not the end of the world if you lose a championship, but at those times it was.
Yeah.
But it's like that.
99 and 2000, you lost pretty much both seasons through injury, although 99 you came back and you were very fast at the end of the season. How difficult was that to reset your mental focus and self-confidence to come back then and 0-1 and win? Jeffrey Herlings is sort of going through that a wee bit at the minute with injury after injury, costing titles. How did you pull yourself out of that hole, and do you think Jeffrey will be able to do similar?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things happened in those years. '98, I lost to Tortelli, but I've met my wife, Kelly, and then yeah, '98 was a season to forget with the injury. Okay, at the end I could win the GP in Galdorf, and Bats Creek I nearly won, but it was at least a happy end of the season. But then I moved on to Husqvarna, and that was one of my biggest mistakes that I've done. So I just went down, even more down, and 2000 I just went on the lowest of my career, and another injury, big injury. And then I also said, okay, one more injury and it's done. I quit.
Right, okay.
Um, and we changed a lot of things. I changed a lot of things. I mean, the whole situation with Grant just blew up. That was a big mess. It was like a spider web with companies and monies, and people had to receive salaries. And it was, for me, I didn't know where to start. But lucky, my wife Kelly, she was really down to earth, and she could think at least straight at that time, and start to figure out, okay, we solved this problem, we solved that problem, we solved that problem. And I still was injured. I had my knee fixed, and my arm was still not 100% together. I was dealing with Rinaldi already at the time. I was dealing with my sponsors that we had. So so many things going on at the same time. But one thing, I always kept believing in it. If I can get the things straight around me, I still can win.
Okay.
So it was just a matter of getting everything together around me, and then I would be able to win again. And thanks to a lot of people around me, I also bring back my father. I bring him back to my daily riding. I bring back my old trainer. Then we moved to Monaco. We moved actually everything. We changed everything. And I just went back to my old stuff like years before, and I had a good team. I started to work with the Italians, with Team Rinaldi. And yeah, I had a good bike, a Japanese bike again. And then we started, and we went to the first GP in Spain, and bam, I won it. And that
And
was the lift off.
And that transpired into 6 world championships in a row. So was that 2001 season really key for your momentum to go on to do what you did in the rest of your career?
Yes, it was definitely. I came back as a complete new Stefan with a different mindset. Yeah, different, and that put me back where I should be. And Finally, I win those 6 championships of Robert, and from there on, the whole pressure just fell off me. What I've been carrying with me for a long time, and then I only became better and better. And like I wrote, my last season in 2006, I was just at my best. Couldn't be better. It was a work for 17 seasons, 17 years of schooling, and my final exam was the last season in 2006, and there I did also nearly everything great.
And do you feel that was the absolute peak of your career and your speed, or would you say against Tortelli was a similar level? What way do you compare those years? Okay.
Maybe the speed at one stage was higher. The competition between him and me was higher, but in 2006 I was more complete as a rider, as a person. As a grown up. Where in '98 I was maybe faster, but I wasn't as good as in 2006. And that's also a little bit age, coming older and building up experiences.
And the way you went out, winning the world title, winning almost every moto that season, and then beating James Stewart to win your class in the Motocross of Nations at Matterley Basin, with that pass around the outside, standing up, was that it's a big part of your legacy, that one moment, despite all the other titles? Do you think you could have went out any better? It was pretty much the best way you could have ended your career, I think.
I think it's the best way to end it. People remember you, how good you was at your last race. And that's why I wanted to stop at my best, that they remember me as the best. It took me so many years to become at that level, at that height. And I see many other athletes, not only in motocross, but in other sports, they continue and they go down the hill again. Like Valentino Rossi, for me, it's not nice to see, he have achieved what he achieved, and he will always get respect for that. But just to keep on going on like this, for what? What he still had to prove. For me, it's a pity to see that, and that I didn't want to do. I just wanted to stop at my best, and Matterley Basin couldn't have been better. We could have won with the team, but I'm happy for myself how to end my career like this.
And throughout your career, the respect from America for the World Championship wasn't what it is now. Was that ever something on your mind? You went out, obviously beating James Stewart, who was the latest guy, but you spanned 2 or 3 generations of Americans, starting with Jeff Stanton, ending with James Stewart, and even ran Villapoto in that race. Did you always feel you had to fight for respect there? And those Des Nations races, or the Fast Cross, or a USGP was a big time for you to show the level of yourself on the World Championship? Or are you able to ignore all that chat as a rider and just focus on your own performance?
Yeah, the older I got, the less I would be busy with that, But when the early days when I did the Nations, it was very high rivalry. To beat the Americans, but at one point it came less and less, and I know my truth, and everyone thinks what they want to think, and I can't change the people how they think and what they feel, whatever. So I start to know, okay, this is my truth, and if they respect me for what I am able to do, then I appreciate that. And the people who don't respect that, okay, I'm sorry. Then we have nothing in common. Then.
From you started racing against the likes of Bale and Stanton and Donny Schmidt and the guys in the 125 World Championship, and moved to 2006 with the new generation coming through. Was the riding different then? Did you have to adapt to a new style, or did you feel not much had really changed bar the move to 4 strokes?
I felt for myself personally then that I always believed for a long time that I have my possibilities, my technique and all that, and I couldn't improve that. But then at one point, I figured out I could still improve my technique and get even better. So that was an important point in my head that and you can continuously improve that. And sometimes it's not you who have to invent new things on a motorcycle, but you can see it with other people or other riders what they're doing, and then come from those inputs to something new. Like the scrub from Baba, I mean, he's the one. I don't think he just woke up and said, "I'm starting to do and going to do a scrub." I think it all came by riding and riding, and he started to develop that technique without knowing what he was doing. Like my foot peg riding is also something that I didn't stand up on one day and say, "Okay, now I'm gonna learn to ride foot peg riding." No, it just came. It just came naturally, and those are of course the nicest thing here. You just cannot just wake up and bring something new. That I don't believe in that.
Do you get a satisfaction when you watch the riders now who all stand up so much, from Herlings to Rocks, and even the American riders are picking up on that as well? Do you feel a sense of pride that that technique has flourished still in this generation of riders?
Yeah, yes. I mean, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see. I think not everyone maybe will acknowledge that it maybe comes the influence from what I have shown in the past or what my style was, but that's everyone's way of thinking or whatever you can call it. So, but the ones who do, yeah, nice. Thank you.
And just on your management career, you worked with KTM and then Suzuki. How did you find dealing with young riders, and what did you look for when you were talent spotting? Because Suzuki had a lot of good riders. You got on the team with Jasakonis, Jeremy Sear, the Lawrence brothers. I know Jet was on an 85, but I'm sure you were able to see the potential he had. Now Suzuki have gone. If I was Suzuki, I'd be looking at the regret I had there, because you were bringing through so many good riders. But I know sometimes you had issues with them listening to you and your methods. So how was that, a fulfilling time, a frustrating time? What was your take on managing all those different
I mean,
personalities?
it was a very interesting time to get this opportunity. It's just sad that that didn't last for long. And if you look back now, like you say, the group of riders that I've put together just on 1 year, because I only did 2 years. If you look back now at those names, then I think I had a fantastic team, for the future, and that's what I was building for. But the mindset from Suzuki is different than what I have. I'm a racer, and I want to move forward. But yeah, I think also a little bit how Gabors has been working in the past. Gabors never said anything against them, what I've said earlier, and I am not like this. I want to move on. If I feel that we are not making any progress, we can. If you have to compete to others, especially like KTM, who can deal really fast within a couple of weeks, they can work on parts, they can work on things. Where we then had to wait for months to first to get an answer and then maybe start to develop it. I mean, then you're too late. Sorry, that doesn't work in my eyes. Not like this. And like Sylvain has been doing it. That was his choice. But at the end, he haven't been winning a lot of championships with his team. He won with Pichon twice and then with Steve. But for me, I wanted to go a step further than that. So it was very, very hard on me when everything stopped, because from my side, I believe that we was going in a good direction with everything, but it wasn't apparently. Was it only because of the financial reason and they just want to put everything on MotoGP? Whatever it is, it's the past now, and Um, but I'm still a little bit proud that on 1 year time, the riders I managed to get together, like the Lawrence brothers and yeah, I mean AJ and Jeremy Sewer, and we had some good riders, but it was not easy to work with them.
Okay.
It's a different mentality, and yeah, not they don't accept everything that you tell them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, it's their career then, and not mine. But yeah, I'm happy now that this is all behind me, and I just work with one rider, and that's with Liam. He follows me, and like I followed my father, how he teach me. Eventually, I didn't do so bad. Um, you know, I had fathers telling me that my system would not work for their boy. Um, then I was thinking like, what the hell are you saying now?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I've so many things, stories, and what all happened, and um, but that's the past. It's just behind me, and we are now working with Liam and try to build him up step by step, and we give him time. We have to be patient, not rush it too much, and that's very important. He will come. It will take a bit of time, but he will come.
Whenever you watch Liam, is it more nerve-wracking than whenever you were racing yourself? What are your thoughts when you're watching him, especially the last AMX round in Oss there? He was leading and at one point pulling away. How were your nerves watching that?
I wasn't very nervous. I'm actually very nervous for each race he does, even when it's ADRC or whatever it is. But okay, EMX, yeah, you hope he's doing well, and it hasn't been an easy season yet so far for him. We've done a lot of preseason races. We've traveled a lot to the British Championship, to the Swedish Championship. You know, we've done a race in Italy, we've done a race in Spain, and so a lot of trying to give him that experience, that building up, which he's still not having. You know, he's only 16. We haven't been doing a lot. Last year he got injured when he was after Metally, when he got a red plate, and then yeah, first race back, and he had that wrist injury. So we missed another season, important experience. And now we are class up. You know, it's you have some tough riders in there, boys that have much more experience. They are much stronger than him, but he managed to do good. So I was so happy, especially for him, the work that he puts in every day, and yeah, just in general, I was happy to really see that he can do it. I'm convinced he can do it, but if it's not on black and white on paper, then you know it's still it's not been proven. So uh, let's hope he can take off now and have that confidence now and to do even more better races like that.
And is the plan to go to MX2 next season, especially now he has the podium and he's showed he can lead races, or are you keeping that later for later in the season to make that decision?
I think it's too soon to make that decision now. It's for sure an option, but let's see how the rest of the season goes. If you can maintain that top 5, top 3 results for the rest of the season, and see where we end in the championship, and then see what opportunities are for next season. You know, we are running our private team. We have a good support from KTM, and the rest we do with our sponsors. So that's still okay to do it in the European, but to go overseas and do GPs means the budget would improve a lot. And you know, then I don't know if we can do that. And there's still maybe a possibility that we do another year EMX. It
Okay.
all depends what the opportunity that will come out, but it's too soon to say now.
Just on the MXGP racing at the minute, what Tony Cairoli's doing, winning Grand Prix at nearly 36 years old. How impressed are you with that? Tim Gajser looks like
Um,
he's pretty mature, and again, a wee bit faster than he was last year. But Jeffrey Herlings, he looked like he was doing everything right this year, and then he's had that unfortunate injury. So, what are your thoughts on him as well? Those three riders, how do you assess their seasons at the minute?
yeah, I mean, Tony, he's another guy this year. You know, last year he was a bit off, and then, yeah, you didn't know how bad it was, his knee injury and all that. But I mean, this year he looks a lot stronger. He looks a little bit more like the old Tony that we've seen in the past. And I mean, he could have been on every race already on the podium. Unfortunately, he made that crash in Russia. But I mean, every GP has been riding really well, and especially that last moto in Oss, very impressive. Those last laps, how he pulled that off, and no, he's back, you know. But yeah, I mean, Tim is also strong, also a good starter, and he's riding also very smart. You know, you saw you should have gave him that victory away in that second moto. That should have not happened. But he's strong. I think he also have a very good motorcycle at the moment. We could see that already last year.
Mm-hmm.
Then yeah, with Herlings, yeah, I mean, what happened there? I have no explanation for that. That's just very unlucky, you know. I think his start hook, the whole shot device didn't came out, and he was scared to jump, so he hold in on the takeoff, and then Monticelli, we seen all that's just so unlucky. But then to ride with a broken shoulder and still win that moto, yeah, that shows how tough he can be. But at the moment, it doesn't bring him a lot, you know. But yeah, I don't know what the problem is there. I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah, is the luck is not on the sides for the moment, and for sure that eats on your mind. Uh, it's not easy. I can believe that it's very tough for him mentally to deal with another injury, and yeah, being the fastest guy out there at the moment.
You've worked with him when he was very young, and you know his character. I'm not sure how your relationship is now, but knowing him as you did, how do you think he's able to keep coming back from these injuries? And do you think this one will play on his mind, as you mentioned, more? Because it could have actually went a lot worse if he'd landed further on his back after what happened last season. So would it, if you put yourself in his position, how would you work about coming back to try and win? Because he seems to have tried to ride smoother and he's still picking up injuries, even if it's not his fault.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been speaking to him for many years now, so I don't know how he changed. So I have no idea. For sure, I can imagine that it's really tough on his mind, and the rest. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. So uh, I know what kind of guy he was in the past, and I mean, he's a special character. That's for sure.
Yeah. You,
He's a very tough guy, and all respect for that. But yeah, other things I don't I don't want to talk about it anyway. But yeah, bad luck keeps following him, and why is that? I don't know.
you still have the record, the GP win record of 101 on the 10 world titles. Tony's very much in contention to equal your record. He's actually inching up on the 101 wins, but obviously he's towards the end of his career. Jeffrey looks maybe the most likely to break that 101. How would you feel if both those records were broken or equal by either of those two riders? Are you okay with that, or do you still like having those two records?
Well, if I have to choose, I would like to keep them. You know, sure. I mean, I've been always ambitious, and I'm still are, but I can't change anything anymore. My time is over, so it's up to them. But I mean, if one of them will break it, yeah, then I mean, tomorrow will be a new day. I mean, it will not be the end of my life. Will not be the end of. I mean, so. But of course, if I have to choose, I prefer to keep him. But I mean, if Tony breaks it, I mean, I have a lot of respect for him, not only as a racer but also as a personality, and so it's different than with Jeffrey. That's for sure.
Just finally, Stefan, on your health, how are you feeling now? And you got to ride a bike again at Foxhill. That must have been a pretty special moment for you. Was it nice to get back on a bike at a track where you had so much success and memories?
Yeah, I mean, I was asked by the organizer and by Paul if I would do a lap of honor, and I had to think about it. And I said, if I have to do it somewhere officially, that would be the place to do it, with the history of Vauxhall in the past and the nations. So I said, yes, I'll do it. And it was nice. It was nice to be back in Vauxhall after so many years. And it was nice to be back on the bike. But I mean, it's just one lap. It's not what I used to do. I used to do a lot of laps, and I can't do a lot of laps anymore. That's also for sure. I mean, but I'm it's possible to ride again. That's possible. My feet are getting better. The pain is getting less and less. So since the end of last year, I'm feeling I feel better with my feet. So that's good. Also for mentally for me, it was important that some things would have started to improve, because after 2 years struggling a lot with the pain in my feet to walk was tough. But now things are looking better and I'm feeling better. So being back on a motorcycle was a challenge that I've put from day one when I woke up from my coma, to be one day back on the motorcycle, and I did. And the next step is maybe to do a few more laps with Liam, which we're gonna do sooner or later, and maybe even with grandfather.
Yeah, that would be very cool. That would be very cool. That's a brilliant way to end. Stefan, thank you very much for all your time and for sharing your career with us. Thank you.